What if I told you that the future of the internet is being built in the backyards of black families in the South, and big tech doesn't want you to see the price they're paying? This land was once history, sanctuary, and home. Now it's the front line of a digital gold rush. Data centers worth billions rise where family gardens once stood, but the cost isn't just the land. It's the air they breathe, the water they drink, and the promise of safety itself, and they're building on a foundation of broken promises, environmental questions, and a history of racial injustice they were hoping you'd never notice. This is what they don't want you to see. In this video, we uncover how big tech is reshaping black towns with broken promises, hidden costs, and betrayal that echoes America's darkest history against black Americans. It almost always starts with a grand announcement. You'll see the governor, the mayor, and smiling executives in crisp suits, all standing behind a banner that reads, "Investing in our future." The headlines are intoxicating. Tech giant to build billion-dollar facility, hundreds of high-tech jobs coming to rural county. For towns that have been overlooked for decades, towns rich in history, but short on cash. This sounds like a prayer answered. We're talking about communities in states like Georgia, Mississippi, Tennessee, and Virginia, places where opportunity has often felt like something that happened somewhere else. Suddenly, the biggest names in the world, Meta, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, are knocking on their door. They're proposing to spend hundreds of billions of dollars on massive data centers, turning quiet fields into the new nerve centers of the global internet. Take Madison County, Mississippi. It's a place of deep history, right next to the state capitol. When Amazon Web Services announced it was investing $10 billion to build 2 data center complexes there, it was framed as a monumental win. The promise? At least 1,000 jobs. Imagine you live there. You've seen local businesses struggle. You've watched your kids and grandkids move away for better opportunities. And then a company worth over $1 trillion says it wants to invest in your home. They promise to be good neighbors. They talk about community partnerships and boosting the local tax base by millions. These companies aren't just building data centers. They're selling a vision of modernity. They're selling hope. The promise is that these massive, futuristic buildings will finally plug these historically disconnected communities into the 21st century economy. But the cloud isn't as clean and weightless as its name suggests. It has a physical, ravenous, and profoundly demanding footprint. And the true cost of that progress is a story written not in press releases, but in the land, the water, and the very air these communities breathe. The first sign that something is wrong often isn't a headline. It's a sound. A constant, unending, industrial hum that never stops. Then comes the sight of new power infrastructure, built not for the residents, but to feed the insatiable hunger of a new neighbor. And then come the bills and the dawning, terrifying realization that your town hasn't just been discovered. It may have been sold out. So why is this happening here? Why are these specific towns, many of them historically black and economically disempowered, becoming the chosen sites for this massive industrial build-out? To answer that, you have to look past the promises and follow the power lines. The cloud runs on electricity. A staggering, almost incomprehensible amount of it. In 2022, data centers already consumed around 2.5% of all electricity in the United States, and that demand is expected to grow dramatically as AI expands. To power the endless scroll, the AI-generated images, and the terabytes of data we create every second, you need to build power plants. Lots of them. And this is where the green-friendly image of big tech starts to break down. To meet the massive energy demands of these new data centers, utility companies across the South are not just building fields of solar panels. Instead, they're delaying the retirement of old coal and gas plants and proposing dozens of new fossil fuel plants, specifically citing data center growth as a key reason. This pattern is repeating itself with chilling consistency, creating what some activists and residents are calling a digital cancer alley. The original Cancer Alley is an infamous 85-mile stretch along the Mississippi River in Louisiana, home to a dense concentration of petrochemical plants. These facilities were strategically built in predominantly black communities, spewing toxic pollution for decades and leading to cancer risks far above the national average. It is a textbook case of environmental racism, where your zip code and the color of your skin can determine the quality of the air you breathe. Now, Organizers and advocates warn that big tech is benefiting from the same playbook as big oil. They are targeting the South, a region with a long history of accommodating heavy industry, often at the expense of its black population who, they assume, won't have the political power to fight back. Look at South Memphis, Tennessee. It's a predominantly black area where the industrial burden is already immense. It's home to an oil refinery, a steel mill, and a Tennessee Valley Authority, or TVA, gas plant. The cancer rate in this part of Memphis is already 4 times the national average. Now, this same community is at the center of a new energy battle. To power the region's growth, including new industry, the TVA is pushing to build new methane gas plants. One of them is a replacement for a retiring coal plant right in South Memphis. Local residents and environmental groups have been fighting this for years, arguing that another fossil fuel plant is the last thing their community needs. This is an accident. It's a choice. Companies have teams of site selection specialists who analyze land costs, tax laws, and, crucially, the likelihood of community opposition. The pattern is undeniable. The path of least resistance for big tech's voracious appetite for land and power often runs directly through the heart of the Black South. The impacts are immediate. It's not just the air. These centers are also massive water consumers, using millions of gallons a day for cooling, putting a strain on local resources. And then there are the utility bills. In states like Virginia and Georgia, data centers are driving a huge surge in energy demand. And while they often get discounted industrial rates for electricity, that new demand forces utilities to build expensive new power plants, the costs of which are passed on to everyone else. This is the sinister bargain at the heart of this story. Big tech arrives with the promise of jobs that often don't materialize for local people, as most data centers employ a relatively small number of full-time workers once built. In exchange for these few positions, communities can be saddled with a legacy of strained resources and higher electricity bills. They are being asked to sacrifice their environment for a progress from which they may see little benefit. And this isn't the first time these communities have been asked to pay the price for someone else's prosperity. This story of digital extraction is just the latest chapter in a much older, much darker American story. To understand why new, energy-intensive industries continue to be sited in black neighborhoods like South Memphis, you have to understand that this land has often been seen as a sacrifice zone. This isn't just about zoning laws. It's about the echoes of history. Let's go back to South Carolina in the 1950s. An ambitious project was underway to dam 2 rivers to generate electricity. To build a massive power plant and the lakes that would feed it, something had to be cleared. That something was the homes of hundreds of mostly black sharecropping families. Their land was taken, and their communities were dismantled. With them, an estimated thousands of graves were submerged forever beneath the water. A community's past was literally erased to power someone else's future. Now, fast forward to today. States like South Carolina are once again racing to build power infrastructure, not just for rural electrification, but to feed the insatiable hunger of new data centers for companies like Google. And where's the pollution from that energy production often concentrated? Disproportionately in those same predominantly black, low-income communities. The names on the corporate letterhead have changed from old industry to big tech, but the underlying principle of environmental racism remains hauntingly the same. This is the ghost in the machine, the invisible operating system of inequality that runs beneath the surface of the digital world. When big tech chooses these locations, they aren't just choosing cheap land and friendly regulations. They're often exploiting a power imbalance that was centuries in the making, one built on a foundation of segregation and redlining. Redlining was a discriminatory practice where banks drew red lines on a map around black neighborhoods, deeming them too hazardous for investment. This starved these communities of resources, prevented families from building wealth, and locked them into a cycle of disinvestment. The effects are not historical artifacts. They are visible today in crumbling infrastructure and, as we're now seeing, the placement of polluting industries. Today, we are witnessing its 21st century successor, digital redlining. It's a bitter irony. The very companies building the infrastructure of the internet are doing so in places where residents can't even get a reliable connection. While massive fiber optic cables carry the world's data to and from these new fortresses of information, the homes just a few hundred yards away can be stuck with slow, expensive, or non-existent internet. The statistics are damning. Across the rural South, about 28% of black residents report having no home internet access, a rate significantly higher than their white neighbors in the same regions. This isn't just an inconvenience. It's a barrier to education, to telehealth, to remote work, and to running a small business. So, what we have is a tale of two Souths. One South is for big tech, a place of massive subsidies and cheap power. The other South is for people who have always lived there, a place of rising utility bills, polluted air, and a digital divide that locks them out of the very future being built in their backyards. The cloud, which promises a world without borders, is reinforcing some of the oldest and deepest borders in American society. The information superhighway is bypassing the very communities whose land and resources it is built upon. It's a colonial relationship, updated for the 21st century. The story of what's happening in these communities is complex, and the powerful entities involved will prefer it stay in the shadows. We are committed to continuing this investigation and amplifying the voices of the people on the ground fighting for their homes and their health. To make sure you don't miss our updates, take a moment to subscribe and click the notification bell. It's a small action that helps us continue this work and ensures these stories get told. Now, let's get back to the people who are refusing to be silent. For years, many residents in overburdened communities felt like they were shouting into the wind. They knew the air was different here. They saw the high asthma rates in their children. Their concerns were often dismissed. But lately, something has shifted. As the scale of the data center boom has become clear, so has the resolve to fight back. This time, they are determined not to be ignored. The pushback didn't start in a courtroom or a state house. It started in church basements and community centers, with neighbors talking to neighbors. It grew into organized opposition. Nowhere has this fight been more visible than in Virginia. In Prince William County, just outside Washington, D.C., a proposal to rezone a huge swath of land to create the world's largest data center corridor sparked a massive public outcry. The plan threatened historic sites, including a Civil War battlefield, and the homes of a local community founded by formerly enslaved people. Residents organized. They formed groups like the Coalition to protect Prince William County. They showed up by the hundreds to planning meetings that went late into the night. They weren't just fighting one project. They were fighting a vision of the future for their county that they had no say in. They were not alone. Legal advocacy groups like the Southern Environmental Law Center, or SCLC, have joined these fights across the South. They are challenging utility companies like Dominion Energy in Virginia and Georgia Power in Georgia over their long-range plans to build more gas plants to power data centers, arguing that they are violating environmental laws and ignoring cheaper, cleaner alternatives. This legal pressure is a game changer. It forces secretive deals into the light and gives communities a leverage to demand a better deal. Derek Johnson, the president and CEO of the NAACP, has put the entire tech industry on alert. The NAACP is pushing for a new framework for data center development, one that demands transparency on energy use and emissions and insists on legally binding community benefit agreements. This is a paradigm shift. For the first time, a national organization with immense legal and moral authority is helping to create a unified front. They are developing the tools, the legal templates, the policy demands for local advocates across the country to use in their own fights. And it's having an effect. The resistance is growing. All across the country, community activists have successfully delayed or blocked dozens of data center projects, forcing companies and local governments to rethink their no-questions-asked approach. While many projects still move forward, the days of secret backroom deals are becoming numbered. The fight is far from over. But what has changed is the awareness. The silence has been broken. The narrative of inevitable progress has been shattered by a chorus of voices demanding justice, accountability, and a simple, fundamental right: the right to breathe clean air. How does this keep happening? How can some of the world's richest companies create so much environmental strain with so little public oversight? The answer is deeply unsettling, because the system is often tilted in their favor. The tech industry has become one of the most powerful lobbying forces in the world. They pour millions into political campaigns and lobbying efforts to ensure that laws are written in their favor. They negotiate massive tax breaks and secret utility deals that are often hidden from public view under non-disclosure agreements. It's a system designed for extraction, where public resources are used to benefit corporate shareholders, all under the guise of economic development. And there's a constant push to make it even easier. There have been ongoing efforts in Washington to streamline environmental laws like the National Environmental Policy Act or NEPA. NEPA is one of the bedrock environmental laws in the country. It's a law that requires federal agencies to assess the environmental impacts of their actions and, crucially, to inform and involve the public. Weakening this law would make it much harder for communities to get crucial information about the health impacts or resource demands of these facilities before they are built. It would effectively silence public input. So what is the solution? It has to be as multifaceted as the problem itself. First, there's a legal fight, exemplified by the challenges from groups like the SCLC. By using bedrock laws like the Clean Air Act, activists can force companies into the open and hold them accountable in court. Second, there is a demand for policy change. This is the work being done by the NAACP with their new data center framework. It involves demanding that any data center project come with a legally binding community benefit agreement. This ensures that a portion of the project's wealth is invested back into the community in ways the residents, not the corporation, decide. That could mean funding for local schools, investments in healthcare facilities, or, most critically, building out robust, affordable broadband for everyone. Third, and perhaps most importantly, is the power of community organizing and public awareness. The story of what is happening in the South's black towns needs to be told loudly and repeatedly. When people share what's happening in their community, it cuts through the corporate spin and builds public pressure that politicians and CEOs cannot ignore. It lets the residents on the front lines know they are not alone. The ultimate challenge is to redefine what we mean by progress. Is progress a windowless building humming with servers, powered by a new gas plant that burdens the children living next door? Or is progress a community with clean air, clean water, good schools, and universal access to the tools they need to build their own futures? We began this story with the idea of a family garden, a symbol of resilience and history. Now, imagine that garden sitting in the shadow of a digital fortress, its peace shattered by the constant hum of progress. That is the story of countless families and communities across the South who were promised a future that looks and feels more like a betrayal. They were told the digital revolution would be clean, ethereal, happening in some distant cloud. But the cloud has to land somewhere. And time again, big tech has decided it will land on the doorsteps of those with the least power to resist, in communities already bearing scars of America's long history of racial and economic injustice. But these communities are refusing to be sacrificed. We have seen the fight in their eyes and heard the resolve in their voices. They are organizing, marching, and fighting in court. They are fighting for their children, their health, their history, and their homes. They are reminding us that no community should have to choose between economic opportunity and the right to breathe clean air. The battle lines have been drawn. On one side are some of the wealthiest corporations in human history, armed with lobbyists and lawyers. On the other side are ordinary citizens, pastors, teachers, grandparents, armed with a sense of justice, a deep love for their community, and the unshakable belief that their lives matter more than a corporation's bottom line. This isn't just a story about the South. This is a story about the future of our digital world. The demand for data and AI is only going to grow. The question we are all forced to confront is a simple but profound one. As the digital world continues its relentless expansion, who will be asked to pay the price? And will we stand with them when they refuse? The fight for environmental justice is ongoing. If you believe this story needs to be heard, the most powerful thing you can do is share this video. Getting the word out is crucial. Thank you for watching.